folks, Scott here with the new My Monthly Hero January 2024 Classic and Premium Kits. Happy New Year, everybody. Of course, everything comes in a 8 by 10 inch zippered plastic pouch. And here's our backer card. It looks like we've got lots and lots of flowers, some big love you. Let's dive right in. The classic kit begins with, we have 5 color layering floral background stencils. There are 5 of these. You can see I've already done a quick run through this. Now here, let's talk about these for a moment. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We also, of course, get 3 inks in this kit, 3 ink cubes. We get an azalea, a summer sky, and a moss core inks in our kit. So the website shows a light azalea, a darker azalea, then a light blue on this, then a pretty dark green on this, the moss, and then a darker blue on stencil number 5. Now, I almost did that. I did use the same colors, but on stencil number 5, I used both blue and green. I used both of the summer sky and the moss inks and a smaller blending brush, so that over the blue parts I was adding blue, over the green parts I was adding green. I think I went a little bit lighter than they show on the website, but this is what that stencil produces. A whole, I'm sure this is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, a whole beautiful stenciled flower background. Of course, you can make these any colors you want. That's the main part of the classic kit. And then we get a coordinating heart window frame cut. That's this right here, which actually fits on your, you can try and ignore the love you, but it fits right around that big rose up there and down there, and will actually cut out a heart of flowers from the center of that stencil. So that's our heart window frame die cut. And of course we have the Love You fancy dies. And then we have the Love You clear stamp set with all these sentiments. We've got a couple flowers here. You're the sweetest, you make me smile, be my Valentine, you have my heart sending you. Very Valentine, very love, lots of love you lots. And then to round out our classic kit, we also have 6 sheets of watercolor paper. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This feels like handmade paper. This is really nice, very interesting color. Watercolor paper in camel. Then we go to the premium kit contents. And in the premium kit, we have 10 floral fancy dies. So these kind of stylized flowers and leaves. There's one little banner there. I did run a quick cut of this. We have some gold leaf flakes, a little pot of gold leaf flakes, always fun to play with. And a sparkle clear lacquer pen. Hero Arts lacquer pens are always great. And then a pink and gold metallic spray, a 1 ounce bottle of pink and gold metallic spray. So everything comes in the premium kit. It looks like we're going to be making lots of Valentines this month. And here we have our 10 cards for the month, a number of white card bases. We've also got, this is an azalea card base, an ivory card base, a craft card base, a black card base, lots of colorful cards this month. If you haven't noticed already, I did get a new self-healing cutting mat. This is the Altanua large cutting mat. Fits in my space just perfectly. Merry Christmas to me. As usual, I do go through and make my first 5 cards using just the supplies included in the classic kit. Now, the color layering floral background stencils and the coordinating heart window frame cut is a very unique combination that gives us the option of getting 2 cards with 1 background. Now, I did want to cut out the heart window fancy die from this panel, but I wasn't too sure exactly where it should line up. So I took a panel of vellum, 40-pound vellum, some nice thick vellum, and I die cut the heart window from the middle of the vellum. Now I could line up the vellum on my inked background and figure out exactly where to place that heart window fancy die. So my first card is a Love You Lots card with a bit of a surprise. When you open it, you got Happy Valentine's Day with the heart coming into the inside. Now, I had been watching a Jennifer McGuire live video where she was making swivel cards like this with Gregory from Conquer the Ninth, so I thought I would try her swivel technique for this first card. I die cut the heart window from the front of an A2 card base, and I ink blended a light layer of azalea ink around the opening. Then I cut a scrap of white cardstock to 1 inch by 3.5 inches, and I scored it at 3/4 of an inch, 1 3/4 inches, 2.5. Folded those 3. You should have a nice little box there. This will be our swivel mechanism, moving our heart from the front of the card to the inside. You can see that little box right there. I stamped the sentiment on the front with VersaFine Onyx Black ink and embossed that with some clear embossing powder. So I glued the 1 inch tab, so that's our last one, the 1 inch tab. I glued that to the back of the inside of the card, right at the fold, at about the narrowest part. And then you fold that in half, add some glue to the front of your card, where it will intersect. Of course, if this is up at the die cut, you only have to glue this much. And then when you close your card, it picks that up and makes a little pop-up box right there. So that will carry your die cut heart from the front of the card, Love You Lots, to the inside of the card. I hope that's pretty self-explanatory. It'll work with any shapes, hearts, squares, circles, diamonds. Love you lots. Happy Valentine's Day. If you'd like to see a more in-depth explanation of this swivel card technique, I'll put a link to Jennifer McGuire's video in my description down below. Love this card. Love you lots. Happy Valentine's Day. I did stamp that on the inside again with VersaFine Onyx Black ink, and I did use some clear embossing powder on that. I was a little concerned about the variegated edge of the die cut getting caught up on the card front, but this mechanism works really well. This is kind of a pop-up card, but I think swivel is a good way to describe this fancy surprise of a card. Love you lots. Happy Valentine's Day. Now I have the rest of that stenciled panel to use on a second card. 2 for 1 is always a bonus. This is on the Hero Hues Azalea cardstock card base, and we have a Love You card using the outside of the die cut from this heart. You can see those two match perfectly. Now I began this card by ink blending azalea ink on 2 ends of a white card panel, going darker at the edge and lighter towards the center. I let the ink blending dry, then I taped over the blending with some clear packing tape. I can see that packing tape right there. That gives us beautiful, shiny die-cut letters without having to use any clear lacquer or glossy accents. Yeah, look at the shine on those letters. Simple packing tape. I love that hack. I die cut 2 more blanks of the Love You Fancy dies from white cardstock, and I glued them together for a nice thicker sentiment. Now I trimmed away a tiny bit from the edges of the inked panel to make it 4 1/8 by 5 3/8, and I glued that to my Hero Hues Azalea card base. That gives us a thin azalea frame around the edges. Now I thought the azalea cardstock was a bit too bright behind the Love You sentiment, so I toned that down with the vellum cutout of the heart I had left from cutting the vellum guide for my first card. So I ran that vellum heart through my Xyron sticker maker to coat the back with some adhesive, and I pieced it into the die cut opening on the front of the card. Now that toned down that azalea cardstock just perfectly. I finished by gluing the stacked Love You Fancy dies on the front. I love all of the azalea colors on this card and the great easy shine on that sentiment. Love you. Now, I'm not quite sure what possessed me to do this next card, but at the time I thought it was a real fun idea. And we have an I love you card with that background stencil actually traced using some colored Pigma Micron pens. I have a little stack of colored Pigma Micron pens here. I thought it would be great fun to trace all of those stencils. That's what we used to do with stencils as kids, was trace them and color them in. But I thought I would trace all the stencils in different colors. Unfortunately, I didn't have a green pen, so I used brown instead. It worked really nice. A very interesting effect. It actually looks kind of hand-drawn. In fact, it almost looks like one of those drawings where you never pick up your pen from the paper, where it's a continuous line drawing. It was interesting, but it was a little stark. So I did lightly blend the inks over the pen lines using the stencils for just a hint of color. There's a hint of that blue, the azalea, some of that green. That helped a lot. Now, I realized that you could make an I from the L in love, so I decided to make this I love you declarative sentiment. Now, I die cut that from some metallic pink cardstock. I think this is a Tim Holtz metallic confections cardstock. And once from some plain white cardstock, I glued those together for strength. Now, I thought this background plus the heart window fancy frame cut just might make a nice easel card. So we have I love you opens up as an easel card with an XOXO holding it in place there. Isn't that nice? Look at the shine on that I love you. I did a partial die cut of the heart on the background and scored the sides of the panel where it stopped the die, about 2 1/8 inches up from the bottom. I took a top folding A2 card base and I scored the front panel at 2 1/8 inches up, and I glued the die cut panel, everything but the top of the heart, to the card base. The heart popping out of the background is actually a bit of a surprise. When you first get the card, you can't really tell that there's even a die cut going on there until you open it up. I stamped the Kisses and Hugs XOXO sentiment on a scrap of white cardstock with VersaFine Onyx black ink. I did emboss that with some clear embossing powder. I trimmed that sentiment to size and added 3 layers of white cardstock for a bit of thickness and glued that to the inside of the card to provide a holder for the easel front. There we go. Stands up on its own. The metallic sentiment is all the shine we need on this wacky hand-drawn card. I love this, and I love you. Now, these bold, all-capital sentiments in the clear stamp set are pretty large, and I noticed that many of them are about the same size as well, width-wise. So for our next card, we have a wacky cut gatefold card. You have my heart, you make me smile, you're the sweetest, and it opens up to be my Valentine. Isn't that cute? I'm calling this a ladder cut on the front. I thought that worked really well with these almost matching sentiments. Now, I stamped the sentiments in the center of a 4 1/4 inch by 11 inch panel using Distress Oxide inks in Tattered Rose, Worn Lipstick, Fired Brick, and Candied Apple from the top to the bottom, and I embossed those all with clear embossing powder. I scored the left and right sides of that panel at 2 3/4 inch and sketched out my letter cuts around the opening using a T-square ruler. I cut those lines carefully with a metal ruler and a craft knife and erased all my pencil guidelines. I added some heart washi tape that I had in my stash down the 2 sides of the card front and turned my attention to the inside of the card. This is where we start using this piece as a stencil. Now, since I only have half of a card base attached to the two sides of my gatefold, you can see the seam right there. I cut another panel of white cardstock to 4¼ inches by 5 3/8 inches. So it's a little narrow just to allow for the side folds. So using my vellum guide from the first card, I ink blended the heart using the azalea ink on the inside of that panel. Then I stamped the sentiment and flowers with the Candied Apple Distress Oxide ink, and I added some clear embossing powder to the sentiment. I glued some small heart sequins to the front and the inside sentiments for a final touch of sparkle. I then glued these two front panels to the completed inside panel. That gives me a seam on the center back, but it's almost unnoticeable. Gatefold cards are nothing new, but I think this is a fun and unique design. You have my heart. You make me smile. You're the sweetest, so be my Valentine. So I'm looking at all of our supplies in our classic kit, and I come across that camel watercolor paper. This is really like the softest watercolor paper I've ever seen. The torn edges of this gave me an idea for my next card. This is on an ivory card base, and we have sending you lots of love, a beautiful little vintage Valentine. So I decided to try stenciling on that watercolor paper. It took the ink nicely, but it's fairly fragile. Soft blending brushes are simply the best for that. This background is created using the inks from the kit in the order recommended. Now, I measured out the background to be 4¼ by 5½ inches, and I tore the edges using a metal ruler. That's fairly easy to do if you've got a nice thin metal ruler, or even, I imagine a plastic ruler would work too. I just fold it where I want to tear it and make that crease right against your ruler, and then just tear it. Gives you a nice straight line and a nice ragged edge. I think that really highlights the handmade quality of this watercolor paper, and it gives this card a little extra vintagey feel. I die cut the Love You Fancy dies from the watercolor paper. I glued another die cut of craft cardstock to the back for strength, and I blended a little bit of azalea ink on their bottoms. And then I gave both of them a light dusting of sheer shimmer spritz. I don't know if you can see that on the camera there. I stamped the sending and lots of both of those partial stamps on the watercolor paper using the azalea ink, and I die coat those with a Lawn Fawn Everyday Sentiment Banners die. I did add a layer of craft cardstock to the back of both for strength. That watercolor paper is so soft, and it seems like it could just fall apart, though it really isn't that delicate. I stenciled the big flower one more time on some watercolor paper, fussy cut it out, and glued another layer of craft cardstock to the back. I glued everything to the ivory A2 card base using a little foam tape on the flower to pop it above the sentiment. Now, I'm not sure the watercolor paper was included in this kit for this purpose, but I really love the vintage effect that paper provides. It's even very soft. The whole card is really soft too. Sending you lots of love. So that's 5 cards using the classic kit items. We've got 3 fancy fold interactive cards. I even used almost all the stamps in the stamp set as well, but now we get to add on the premium supplies too. So my next card is Hugs and Kisses. This card makes me happy. So first, I sprayed the pink gold metallic spray on a 8½ by 5½ inch panel of Canson multimedia cardstock, and I let that dry. I die cut all of the floral fancy dies from some white cardstock, and I colored all the pieces with my Happy Birthday Again new Ahoo alcohol markers, the refillable alcohol markers. Happy birthday to me. I paper pieced all of the die cut pieces together using some thin micro pore surgical tape. I don't know if you you've ever used this, but this tape is so perfectly sticky and yet perfectly thin. I use it a lot when I'm paper piecing and want to stick a cutout piece back into a cutout piece. Love this stuff. I'll have links to all of these odd supplies on my blog over at cardcutups.com. I added drops of the Sparkle Clear lacquer pen to the center dots of the 2 large flowers, and I added some highlights with a white gel pen. I stamped the sentiment on the banner die cut with the help of my Misty, of course, using VersaFine Onyx Black ink, and I did emboss that with some clear embossing powder, and then I ink blended a little antique linen distress oxide ink onto the banner. Now I die cut the pink gold background with a Simon Says stamp. What is this? The modern postage stamp rectangles. And then I picked a larger square infinity die to help me create my little gold frame around that. Is this the right size? I did pick the right size. I love using a Zig two-way glue pen. This is a chisel tip Zig two-way glue pen when I'm working with foil flakes, because this glue dries tacky. So I literally taped on a frame onto my craft card base, just taped the outside edges in place, used my Zig two-way glue pen to draw a line around the inside of that. Make sure that was covered well, took the pattern off, and let that dry. The Zig two-way glue pen actually goes on blue and dries clear, so you know perfectly when it is dry. It goes clear. Then I took our gold flakes and tamped them down into that drawn rectangle of glue, burnished that down, and then used a stiff little brush to brush away all of the excess pieces. That gave us this really nice gold foiled frame. I glued the background directly to our card front, and I added all the flowers and the sentiment with foam tape and glue. There's lots of color on this card, and believe it or not, I actually used every die and all of the extra supplies from the premium kit on this one card. Well, I guess that wraps it up. So I do have more of that pink gold metallic spray background on hand, so I thought I'd see how the gold leaf flakes pair up with that. So for our next card on a pitch black card base, we've got another Love You card with that great gold leaf on top of that pink gold spray. I used my Zig two-way glue pen on top of that sprayed cardstock, making sure to make it a little streaky. Here it is. Here's that whole piece. So that's all of the gold foiling I did. And then I die cut the love from that. I did die cut 2 more blanks from pitch black cardstock to glue behind. So I stacked those and glued them behind. I stamped the U sentiment, a partial stamp, again, on more of that pink gold cardstock with VersaFine ink, and embossed that with some clear embossing powder, and then fussy cut it out. Now, I die cut a Hero Arts nesting heart die from Hero Hue's peony cardstock, and I glued that to an A2 pitch black card base. The sentiment is glued on top, and the U sentiment is glued in the middle. With that foiling, the 2 sentiments almost seem like one. I thought that was very interesting. I did add a writing surface on the inside of this card using the same peony cardstock. I thought that was a fun pink writing surface. I love the stark black and pink and gold on this card. Very simple, yet quite stunning. So after that interesting black Valentine, I started wondering about the possibility of creating a background with the color layering stencils using only shades of gray. And we have a Be Mine card, all in gray with some pink. So on a panel of light gray cardstock, I ink blended the stencils using Hickory Smoke Distress Oxide ink for stencils 1 and 2, Concord and 9th Dove ink for stencil 3. There's a slight green cast to that ink. Then Concord and 9th Mushroom ink for stencil 4 and black soot distress oxide ink for stencil 5. Very interesting, but not particularly inspiring. I wondered about cutting the heart window out of this or creating a sentiment right on top when I remembered that heart stencil I did on the inside of card number 4, the Gatefold car. I decided to let all these inks dry overnight and try inking on top of them. Again, I pulled that vellum stencil out from my stash, and then I ink blended that azalea ink right in place. I thought that was just the pop of color that this card needs. Really interesting. That's a 1-layer card using both the layering stencils and the heart fancy die. I stamped the sentiment on a scrap of light gray cardstock using onyx black ink, embossed that with some clear embossing powder, and I fussy cut it out. I cut the ink blended panel to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches and glued it to a white A2 card base. The sentiment is attached to the front with some foam tape, and here we have another fun way to use those stencils and heart window frame cut. Other than the sentiment, this is actually a 1-layer card. It might be a little goth, but I like this a lot. Be mine. And of course, there's more mileage to get from those floral fancy dies. Of course, they're perfect for cutting from colored cardstock. So for my next card, we have another I Love You card. I found some textured cardstock in my stash to use for the flowers on this card. I die cut one last panel from my pink gold spray cardstock with a Lawn Fawn stitched rectangle die. I measured out a mat using the watercolor paper and again tore the edges with a metal ruler. Nice, lovely little mat with that soft edge. I love that. I glued the background to the mat and then to an A2 white card base. I die cut the flowers and leaves 3 times and the small white flowers 6 times. I colored the centers of the large flowers with an alcohol marker and paper pieced them in place using my micropore tape. I did a very light blend of azalea ink on the white flowers, and their centers are actually die cut from the middle of the large die. So those are 6 little dots in the center of that flower, and that gave us our 6 little dots in the center of our white flowers. This sentiment is an old Lawn Fawn scripty borders I Love You sentiment. I've had these for a long time. I die cut that twice from some matching magenta cardstock, and I glued those together. The sentiment is glued to the card front and trimmed at the very edges. I thought that magenta cardstock went really well with the pink gold spray, and there is plenty of sparkle there. There you go, there's some gold on that. So there's no embellishments needed. I love you. So I have avoided creating a shaker card since I thought everybody would be making them with this kit. But after looking at the Hero Arts blog and other posts, I don't see many shaker cards. So I guess that's reason enough to do my own. And here we have a Happy Mother's Day shaker card. My mother loves flowered cards, and I don't think I've ever sent her a shaker card. So I thought this would be a good opportunity to make this year's Mother's Day card using this kit. The stencils are inked in Spiced Marmalade Distress Oxide ink for stencil 1, Carved Pumpkin Oxide ink for stencil 2, Lemon Drop Reactive ink for stencil 3, Moss ink for stencil 4, and Fossilized Amber Distress Oxide ink for stencil 5. Mom loves her yellows and oranges. I trimmed the panel to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches and die cut the heart window from the center and glued that to the front of an A2 white card base. I stamped the sentiment. This is from a years old paper pumpkin stamp set. And you can see it. Happy Mother's Day. I've used that a lot. It has some great flowers in it that I thought lent themselves to use on this card. I stamped that with some VersaFine Onyx Black ink and embossed it carefully with clear embossing powder. So I glued the acetate behind the opening. I added a double layer of foam tape around the heart and on the edges of the panel. I filled the shaker with lots of crystal shakers and a bunch of little mini die-cut gold sparkle flowers. I think you can see some of those there. There's my little gold flowers in there. I have some of these Dress My Craft mini flower dies. So I used some of these with some gold sparkle cardstock. I think this is it. There you go. To add some real flowers inside our shakers. I lined up the foam tape panel with the card base and I glued them both together. Flowers aren't just for Valentine's Day. I think my mom will like this a lot. Of course, you can use any color combination you can think of with those color layering floral background stencils. I think that's what makes this kit truly very versatile. And there we have it. That wraps up my 10 cards for the My Monthly Hero January 2024 Classic and Premium kits. I think this is a fun variety of cards this month. We've got a swivel card, an easel card, a gatefold card, shaker card, lots of Valentines, and even a Mother's Day card. Now, though I mostly stuck to the colors included in our kit, especially on these first 5 cards, I do think there's a good variety of looks and styles and even some fun techniques here. Tell me, which ones are your favorites? Now, at first, I wasn't very inspired by this kit, but after putting it to some good use, I discovered that there were actually lots of options for card making. The stencils and heart frame die cut alone are a terrific pair of tools for interesting backgrounds and a wide variety of card styles. I'm always game for more flower and leaf dies, and if foil flakes intimidate you, I recommend the Zig two-way glue pen. I think this makes foiling so very easy. I had much more fun with this kit than I thought I would. Both the classic and the premium kits are still available at Hero Arts, as well as the premium elements and the whole January release. If you like what I've shown you today, if you want to try some of these cards for yourself, or you have some ideas of your own, please use my links in the description down below when you go shopping at Hero Arts. Doing so helps support me and this page so I can continue to bring you my takes on the new My Monthly Hero kits as they come available. Your support is always supremely appreciated. Thank you so much for sharing some of your precious time with me here today. I'm always thrilled to hear from you. Remember to like me, list me, pin me, post me, share me with all of your crafty friends. Don't run with scissors. And as always, I wish you and yours love and light and happy crafting. For more detailed information, better pictures, and product links, please visit my website at cardcutups.com.